So let's talk about the 4 social milestones, and then I want to give you 3 guiding principles. The first of the social milestones is awareness. We want to help kids and adolescents build awareness of self and awareness of others. Generally speaking, boys tend to be less aware, girls tend to be hyper aware. It's part of why toddler-age boys have a tendency to stand too close and talk too loud. They have difficulty reading space, proximity, and tone. It's a part of why adolescents, when they move into that space where they're more self-absorbed, can lose a lot of awareness of what's going on around them. So we're gonna have to labor in this space a little longer. I think back to a conversation I had with an elementary age boy who was so excited to tell me about a soccer victory he had experienced, and he had the winning goal of the game. He was sitting on the couch across from me, telling me the story, and about midway, he wasn't even aware that he had stood up, was walking toward me, and eventually standing over me. And right as he reached the point in the story where he said, "Guess what happened next?" I said, "Okay, time out. Guess where you're standing?" On top of me, and you're accidentally spitting on me. And this amazing kid was roadblocked in awareness just out of his enthusiasm. So a number of things can get in the way, which is why we're gonna have to labor in this space with kids. The second social milestone is reciprocity. And reciprocity is just the give and take of relationship, the back and forth of conversation, understanding that every healthy relationship is a two-way street. And as we've been discussing, it's possible that we as adults can get stuck along the way. And not long ago, I was at a dinner party, seated next to a gentleman for no more than 30 minutes, but it felt like about 8 hours because he talked about himself nonstop. I remember getting up from the table and thinking, this man knows nothing about me. I don't even think he knows my name, because he had never developed reciprocity, that rhythm of back and forth. And with kids in our office who get stuck in that place, we might use a tennis ball that we toss back and forth, or a Nerf football. And when I'm holding the ball, I'm talking. When I've passed the ball, I'm listening. And to develop that natural rhythm that isn't as natural to a lot of kids. The third milestone is ownership, learning to clean up my side of the street. And the research would tell us that when something goes wrong in a boy's life, he tends to blame other people. He points the finger outward. And moms listening, he most often blames you. I'm sorry to have to remind you of that. When something goes wrong in a girl's life, she's the quickest to blame herself. And moms listening, think about that. When you see your kid struggling, the tendency can be to go straight to the place of thinking, what did I do wrong? So ownership's important. The last social milestone is boundaries. And research would tell us here that boys have more difficulty with respecting boundaries. Girls have a lot more difficulty with setting boundaries. So let's talk about 3 guiding principles that could help us with developing these social muscles. The first is that prioritizing our kids' emotional development is one of the best ways to help them develop socially. It's oftentimes that our kids are struggling in relationship because they haven't yet developed enough empathy or perspective or resourcefulness to be a good friend. Now, sometimes it's just they haven't developed, as I mentioned, enough of that back and forth. I had another conversation with a family in my office. The parents shared they had relocated a lot over the course of their journey as a family, and the mom commented, I think it's that my son just has not met the right friend yet. I remember about 10 minutes into my conversation with her son, thinking to myself, I don't think it's that this kid hasn't met the right friend yet. I don't think he knows how to be the right friend yet. This young man, without being aware, was talking over me, was talking at me, was interrupting me, but he was never talking with me. The second idea is that kids are experiential learners. They're gonna make the best connections by going through the motions. And so we're huge advocates of role play. Think about all the different moments of life our kids are gonna face when we could practice or role play what the conversation could look like. asking a teacher for extra credit in a subject where they're struggling, asking a coach for extra playing time and what I need to work on, talking to a friend who's recently experienced a loss or whose parents are navigating a divorce. Think about role play as an important tool. Also think about cues and code words. Those are great experiential tools as well. Cues and code words give us an opportunity to trigger our kids' imagination or their memory without necessarily embarrassing them in front of friends if they're struggling socially in certain moments. My mom, for example, was the queen of cues. And so when I was growing up and in adolescence, as I mentioned, when I could get a little disrespectful in my tone at times, if I was talking with my mom, she would tap her ear. And that was my reminder that my tone had shifted and I needed to modify. If I turned a conversation into an argument, she would tap her lips. And I could either stop where I was or I could keep on going and I would lose some Atari time. I just dated myself by talking about Atari, didn't I? The third guiding principle is that every kid develops at their own pace. Research would tell us that in about every thread of a child's development, with the exception of gross motor, girls are going to be ahead of boys, in the social and emotional in particular. But there are also other categories that would invite us to create modifications and invite a different rhythm with our kids' development emotionally and socially. For example, if you have a child with special needs, their pace is inevitably going to look different. If you are parenting a gifted child, I would encourage you to acknowledge that their pace may look different as well. We know for a fact that a lot of kids with a really high IQ can have some space between their IQ and their EQ. They can have a little more difficulty sometimes with regulation. They can have a little more difficulty sometimes with awareness and reading what's going on around them. Those kids can, without realizing it's happening sometimes because their minds are moving at such a fast pace, be more corrective or more abrasive in their interactions at times. So wherever your child is in their journey, we want to lean into acknowledging their pace is their pace.